Shalom, shalom, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of the Pulse of Israel. We're not just in Israel. We're not just in our eternal, indivisible capital, Jerusalem, since King David's time. We are in the seat of the sovereignty of the Jewish people back in our ancestral homeland, the Knesset, Israel's parliament. Today, with the head of Israel, the Knesset's Committee of Constitution, Law, and Justice, MK Simcha Rothman. Correct, Simcha?
Correct.
Wonderful. Here,
I
get to do this. All right.
I can do it all.
Yeah, he gets to do it all the time. I've had the privilege of interviewing Simcha a number of times over the past few years. Before he was in the Knesset, Simcha, and I'll provide the videos for you. You can go back and watch them. Simcha has been on top of the justice system in Israel and the need for reform for the justice system in Israel for years. He wrote a book about it years ago, and ever since he's been active in the Knesset and was elected, he has been active for judicial reform as well. So we're not going to get into the specifics of the judicial reform. You could watch this video or that video to be reminded about all of that. Today we're going to deal with the justice system and the war, since that is your expertise, and you are involved in a number of issues specifically with regards to the involvement of the justice system and the war. So let's just start out generally. Whether specifically about the justice system or not, how do you think we are doing? What's your message to people around the world, to Jews, about the state of the Jewish people, Israel today in this war? And we're at a state where we still have not retaliated against Iran, which that could happen any day, any moment. We're expecting it most probably to be before the elections in November in the United States. What words of status, of inspiration, of update can you give everybody from your perspective here that you're allowed to tell us?
Yeah. So first, I think that everyone sees the change, especially in the northern border, also in Gaza, but mostly in the north. For too long, we were waiting there. So we know now that some of the wait was for a good reason. You cannot have an operation like this without the right kind of preparation and time. But it's also, and it's the question of how long are you going to take it? And I think for that we have a change, and a good change. We decided we're not going to take it anymore, and I think it's a big step in the right direction. And I think this message echoes loud and clear throughout the Middle East. It's not just affecting Lebanon or Hezbollah. It's not just affecting Hamas. I think it echoes. And the fact that now, of course, we need to learn to be patient, but not too patient, if you know what I mean. So for a period of maybe since the assassination of Hania in Iran, like we were waiting for Iran. Now Iran is waiting to what we are trying to do. I think it should go over the like a chess game. You move the piece, I move a piece. You move the piece, I move the piece. It should be send the right kind of message. And the message should be wrapped with bombs and missiles and stuff. Don't just send the message. But
it shouldn't just be moving a piece. We should be sending the queen ready to get a checkmate.
We should go toward checkmate sooner. The sooner the better. Because this chess game and this patient game is important. It's important to have this patience. And the public in Israel has patience and proved that over the last year, and actually over the last 100 years, because we are facing, if we talk about the Jabotinsky ideas of iron wall against our enemies. So we are here, despite all the prophecies they heard that we will not be here, and we are continuing and we are prospering, Baruch Hashem. So that's but I don't think we need to be too patient. We need to be patient, but not too much, because our enemies don't get it as patience. They get it as lack of ability to fight. They get it, and the fact that it's not true, and we've proven it's not true, it doesn't matter. Because if they get it that way, they will try to have all kinds of attack, hoping that we will fade away or we will fail. And we don't want those attacks. We will not fade away. We will not fail. Hashem is with us. We will not.
Right.
But I don't want them to try, because them trying is October 7th.
Right.
And we don't need other October 7th. We got the message.
Right.
So we see good progress in the north. I speak to soldiers, friends, family, underground, and get good news after a long time of oh, we're not doing enough. Oh, it has changed. Also in Gaza, we see in the north of Gaza, we see a change. It should be bigger. In there, I can have more criticism on the fact that we still pay too much tribute to the international illegitimate pressure that demands from Israel things that no other country needs to do, like this humanitarian aid in numbers. We could have solved world hunger with the amount of aid that Hamas has gotten, and it's not going for food. It's going to get them more money and more support. We shouldn't pass it until we find a way that it's never passes through the hands of Hamas. It shouldn't happen. The pressures, of course, are enormous.
And just
but we need to fight it.
And just to give clarification for people to understand, because I talk about this every once in a while, and just recently it just happened again. You have the Biden administration basically forcing Israel to give this humanitarian aid to Gaza, to Hamas in Gaza, and if we won't do it, then they will withhold weapons. Like that's specifically in their agreements that they forced Israel to sign, and hence we're in this
Yes.
catch-22 situation. I want to start with you actually regarding the international community, since we're going there, and Israel's law system. The biggest news items nowadays actually deals with the fact that the United Nations, via UNIFIL, whether they knew about Hezbollah and what they were doing and planning and building up all those weapons and building tunnels right next to their bases, or whether they just allowed it to happen. Whatever it is, the international community and UNIFIL, whose sole purpose was to ensure that Hezbollah not be there and not smuggle weapons, they allowed it to happen. It happened. A huge failure. Okay, that's UNIFIL. I'm not going to ask you about UNIFIL. I'm going to go to the other United Nations organization called UNRWA, because just recently, I think you're involved with this bill as well, here in the Knesset, they finally, you here in the Knesset finally passed a bill to remove, I'm not familiar with the details, but in a sense to remove UNRWA from its involvement in Israel, because it's been proven beyond any doubt whatsoever that UNRWA and Hamas work together, especially in Gaza, and through their activities are very anti-Israel. The question dealing with Israel's justice system, and correct me if I'm wrong, but what I read up is that even in the bill that was passed, that second and third reading, that finally has Israel standing up for itself, forbidding UNRWA activities in Israel, the justice system fought to ensure that there was a segment that basically says, but Israel has to follow all previously international-made agreements, which in a sense it neuters the whole bill, because the justice system could always say, no, this is something we already agreed to, so we have to allow UNRWA to do that. So are you able to go a little deeper into that issue?
So I think the details, as I try to do it, very complicated. It's a problem that we're facing in almost every legislation we pass here in the Knesset. And that's why I talk so much about judicial reform. It doesn't matter what kind of legislation you pass, there is some kind of school of thought within the legal advisory for the government, mostly for the government, sometimes from the Knesset, most of the time from the government, that they need to make it better, to make it more proportional, to make it like to be our watchdogs. And I don't know who appointed them to be our watchdogs. We are supposed to be their watchdogs. We are the representative of the people of Israel.
We elect you.
We need to look that the unelected officials, part of government, they follow laws, they act and save, do not waste money, they do not use their power in a bad way. And instead, in Israel, this strange adaptation of the term democracy, not democracy because democracy is people should rule. No. Democracy in Israel means for them that some unelected people will enforce their own values on the public and their elected officials. Very strange definition, but that's sadly reality. So you see it in UNRWA, which the only reason this law has not passed years ago is the objection from what you would call the deep state, the people that are not elected, trying to keep whatever structures they believe is true. And the people, and we're passing a legislation to take away citizenship from terrorists who get salaries from the Palestinian Authority.
Israeli citizens who were terrorists, to remove their citizenship because they were
convicted as terrorists. That, for me, that's enough. But legal advisory said, no, don't leave them without citizenship. It's not okay according to some international treaty, whatever, which I don't think we should care, because international treaty is important, but it's more important for us to save our citizens from terror. But never mind. The Knesset over the years agreed to it. But we said if someone gets salary from the Palestinian Authority, it means that he has where to live. Let him live in Ramallah, okay? Not that it solves any problem. Ramallah is part of Eretz Israel just the same. And terror come from Ramallah to everywhere just the same. But you know that he won't have the ability to go wherever he wants and get everywhere with an Israeli ID. No, you cannot do it.
Even that we're not allowed to do.
You have to go through since this legislation has passed, it's a few different legislations about taking away citizenship from terrorists. There has never been an Israeli citizen that they took his citizenship through this process.
Wait, the law was passed? So why hasn't it been implemented?
2008.
So why was
an amendment in 2018 to make it work better. An amendment in this Knesset to make it better. It does not work because the legal advisory didn't want to file it, and then they want to file it because we'll pass the legislation that they should file it, so they filed it, but they don't have the information, and you have to get them the information. They don't want this kind of info. They kill this legislation through legalities which are not acceptable, through bureaucracy which shouldn't be at place when we're talking about national security, because they don't want. And it's at the end, they came here to committee 3 stories above us and said, if the court has to have the final word, whose citizenship we're taking away? So I told them, how come to arrest someone and put him in jail without due process because you suspect he's involved in what they call Jewish terror? You can do it in the decision of a minister, or basically the decision of the Shabak.
Right. The security services.
The security services. It doesn't have to go in the beginning through the court. You can appeal to the court.
Right. And again, just to give people perspective, today we're dealing, and I'll give my explanation. You don't have to agree or disagree, but because of pressure of a narrative from the Biden administration that there's settler violence, so Israel's defense establishment is arresting many, many settlers based on information that would not hold up in a court of law. They're not even given any due process whatsoever, and they're thrown out of their homes and have to stay away from their farms for 3 months, for half a year, for a year. And this is the case of what Simcha is referring to. And sometimes even put in prison. And that's without any due process whatsoever. But in terms of dealing with real terrorists, the legal system is not allowing us to deal properly with.
No, it has to go through the court.
Has to go through.
And if not, the law is unconstitutional. Now, there is nothing in the non-existent constitution of the State of Israel about it. But that's the claim. Now, and you try to pass an amendment, it goes forever because you get, it's not the healthy debate. It's a friction that is meant to stop you. So, Baruch Hashem, we have in this government, we have Knesset members who are not willing to stop. So it continues. But when you remind yourself that to go from, we don't speak to the PLO because they are terrorists and it's a felony to even talk to them, to Oslo Accords, it took 8 months. 8 months until Oslo Accords was a done deal.
Right. Simcha is referring to back in 1993. Up until there was a law in Israel that it's forbidden for any Israeli to talk to a representative of the Palestinian Liberation Organization. And then secretly, Shimon Peres and his Mary Balin men spoke to representatives of the PLO and brought about the disastrous Oslo Accords that was then signed on the White House lawn back in the early 1990s. All illegal because of that law.
So it took 8 months.
They went against the law then.
To go from the declaration of Sharon that he will do the disengagement from Gaza.
In 2005.
To the fact that there were no Jews in Gaza. It took a year and a half. And when you try to pass a legislation that will banish families of terrorists that supported their actions or knew about it and did not prevent it, not just families. Because already we go back on collective punishment, all the claims. No, you have to be involved. To banish them from Israel, send them to Gaza, send them to Judea and Samaria. No, that they will not be able to go around freely in Israel and plan the next attack, as they do. Prime Minister Netanyahu spoke about it and tried to push it forward in 2016. The legal advisor said no.
You're talking about the law to expel
banish
families
of terrorists. It was after other governments tried to do it before, and we're trying to pass it, and
it's been 8 years. You said 2016.
And to cancel the disengagement law, to cancel it from northern Samaria, it took more than 18 years. So to kick all the Jews out of Gaza, it took a year. To uproot 10,000 people, because the system was with you. And if you were against it, you will be prosecuted. And if you protested against it, and if you plan on blocking roads to fight it, before you even block it, you will get arrested by the Shin Bet, by the Secret Services. And now you actually block roads to prevent something, and it's okay.
And the justice system.
So that's, and my good friend, you probably know him, Erez Tadmor.
Yes.
So he wrote a book. Why do you vote right and get left?
Right. Fabulous book.
This process, you need to be very dedicated to go through it. And Baruch Hashem, in this coalition, in this government, we see more Knesset members who are willing to go
to push the deep state,
the extra mile that's needed. It's still, we need way more. We need, and it's hard. I understand why people give up. Of course, I'm not going to give up. Not on the judicial reform. Not on all the changes that Israel must have to be a real democracy and a real homeland of the Jewish people. You need them both. It's connected. You cannot have one without the other.
Right.
Because the people who are against it fighting in an undemocratic way.
Right.
So we need to do it. And the examples that you gave are just an example.
And we're just starting, folks. We got some more we're going to talk about. Because literally, Simcha is explaining to us how, forget politics, the need for judicial reform in Israel is to save our lives. It's literally to save our lives, because this deep state, together with the justice system, is always stopping the necessary changes to be made in order to protect our lives and for Israel to defend itself properly from the evil we are up against. So now I'm going to take a real step backwards because it's all connected. I'm sure you remember as me the famous line from former Prime Minister Yitzhak Rabin. Why did he claim himself to finally give in to the pressure from Shimon Peres and agree to the Oslo peace process? Because he said, we're going to be able to have a Palestinian authority that will fight the terrorists. Bli bagatz ubli b'tselem.
ובלי אמהות נגד שתיקה. בלי אמהות נגד שתיקה.
Okay, I don't remember that last part, right? But this was former Prime Minister Yitzhak Rabin himself saying, okay, yeah, we need this peace process because my hands are tied, I can't fight the terrorists, but having the Palestinian Authority, they won't have the Israeli Supreme Court on top of them, stopping them from fighting the terrorists. They won't have the far left-wing civilian organization stopping them from fighting the terrorists. That's why we have to make this peace process. And his claim was a result, and I'm almost certain I'm correct, of the 400 Hamas terrorists that Israel, under Prime Minister Rabin, expelled to Lebanon because they were Hamas terrorists.
Not even families.
Not even families. And it shows you that Rabin even understood that was necessary to expel terrorists, not live amongst us. And it was the Supreme Court that made him return them all back to their homes and pull them out of Lebanon.
After they got boot camp in terrorism
in Lebanon,
and they returned, and they were the ones that fused, that they were the fuse and the ignition for the major bombing attacks, the buses that explode, all the techniques, the suicide bombers, a technique that was developed a lot in Lebanon, and that's where this. So he did something that he thought that he must do as a prime minister to guard the lives of Israelis, and were stopped by Bagatz. And he said, okay, if you can't fight, and by the way, it happened between 77 and 92. So because he was prime minister in 1977.
What happened in 77?
Between 1977 and 1992.
Right.
Rabin was prime minister until 1977.
Right.
And then other people came.
Right.
And then he returned in 92.
Right, as prime minister.
And the first thing he wanted to do is to fight terror the way he used to do in 77. And then he got the hold.
Right, the Supreme Court justice stopped him.
Can you guess what happened between 1977 and 1992? Aaron Barak became very influential justice in the Supreme Court and basically created this ongoing intervention in issues that were never legal to begin with.
Right.
And not only fighting terror became a legal issue at that time. Another issue that we still carry today started then in court, the draft law.
Right.
Because until then, the court said it's none of my business. Let the political system.
But Simcha is referring to the ultra-Orthodox draft issue law in order to deal with them joining the army or staying and learning.
And then the court said, after so many years, he said, this is a political issue, let it be dealt with politically. And then you can get more people. It's not a fight, it's a negotiation.
Right.
Once the court got into it and started saying you have by law to get the ultra-Orthodox draft, then it became a fight. No, even achievements that we were able to achieve here in the Knesset, to get more people and to do a process. If it's a legal issue, then either yes or no, you cannot have a process. You have to do it. Right. You have to do it fast, in a timely manner. It's not enough. I will cancel the Tal law, and that was making the progress in a way that the ultra-Orthodox society can go with.
Right.
So it did not create any better outcome, but it did create an ever-growing fight within Israeli society on an issue that is a social and political issue needs to be solved in the political system.
Right, right. So and again, the important thing of the direction I want to go with you is the judicial reform is not a left-right issue, because I used the example Yitzhak Rabin and his labor-led government back in the early 1990s were stopped by the Supreme Court and endangered our lives and forced him to go to the peace process thinking that's how it's going to protect us. So it's not a left-right political issue. It's about saving our lives. Now I'm going to go to this war, okay? Because, again, I'm an IDF reserve soldier, and I'll go into some of my experience as well dealing with the problems of the justice system as fighting our battles. Before the war erupted, soldiers along the Gaza border were stopped by judicial directives from being able to protect our border. The amount of permissions they needed to get in order to be able to shoot at Gazans coming to attack our border and attacking soldiers on the other side of the fence, it was like unsurmountable. And soldiers, I know this personally, soldiers were personally afraid to shoot because they could become court-martialed. So you can in a sense say that the eruption of October 7th happened and our enemies in Gaza had the confidence that they could get away with attacking us, even despite the fact we had a technological border and a strong army, because our soldiers were neutered by judicial directives.
And even more, the explosives that took down the fence on October 7th were brought there by people getting near the fence in the perimeter that should have been a perimeter that anyone who gets there
neutral, cleansed, right?
And they weren't shot. And the reason they weren't shot is because now, and the court did it in a very, I would say, sophisticated, but it's actually the usual way. The court, when you try to pin the responsibility on it, runs away, because they really have authority without any accountability. So they're not saying stuff. They deal with the court. They deal with the issues that they shouldn't deal with to begin with. In this case, rules of engagement in the Gaza border. The court should not have taken the case to begin with. They took the case. Right.
If it would have, right, Simcha saying the second that it was proposed to go to the High Court should have said, this is not a case for us. We don't deal with the security issues of rules of engagement. That's the Army's issue.
But the court did not do it. Have a long debate. Gave a ruling supposedly saying, you can do this, but you cannot do this. Give some limits. But then, when you try to, okay, let's try to make this ruling into a reality, the legal advisory of the army says, okay, but if I will go on this border, there will be a next appeal.
Right.
And I can't have a next appeal because it will endanger me. So let's take a safety precaution, but not a safety precaution from the terror. It's a safety precaution from the court.
Right.
And the court should not have been there to begin with. Another issue, very similar issue, is the release of terrorists during wartime.
Right.
That happens.
Right.
Now, the court kept his hand, quote unquote, clean. They did not release these terrorists, because if they will issue this kind of ruling, release this terrorist, they will be responsible to every action of this terrorist. So they don't do it. They say, you have to solve the problem. Otherwise, we might say you cannot hold those terrorists in this place.
What problem? The problem of the prisons.
Of the prisons.
Right. They said there are problems with the prisons.
Or the food, or the density,
quarters, density of how many prisoners in a cell.
Issue.
Right.
Whatever issue.
And because of that, it forced the
and then because the security service are afraid of a verdict, they say, "Oh, we'll
have to release them.
We will volunteer to do it." So my criticism is on the court, but also on the government, even on the ministers, not calling it for what it is, not telling the court, you have to make the decision, saving the court face. A lot of the time, what we do here in the Knesset, what we do here in the government, what ministers do, they don't push it all the way to the court because they want to save time. They don't want they are afraid of the outcome because they're responsible. But I say the responsible act to do is to make the court have the decision. In a way, Yariv Levin is doing it now with
he's the Minister of
Justice, with the Judicial Selection Committee. He says, if you want to give a ruling, you give a ruling, but you have to give a ruling on every action. I will not save your face. You want to appoint yourself and put the crown on your own head? Do it yourself.
Referring to the Chief Justice.
I will not cooperate. Right. In a way that's making
clear to everyone.
Clear to everyone that what they're doing is the most biased, the most not responsible thing to do, the most divisive thing to do. It's very
conflict
clear.
Of interests to be shown
Conflict
for everyone
of interest. So, of course, I prefer to reform the system instead of calling it for what it is. I'm not only on a PR campaign, I'm trying to change.
Right.
But after a year of war, in a year that they shouted that we are trying to take away democracy for corruption, let the public see the real corruption.
Right, right. And again, I'm taking a break from asking you questions to bring everything together, because one thing I'm always telling you, we're winning this war not just because of our holy idea of soldiers on the ground who are literally winning this war. It's also because of God above, because we're fighting against our own justice system, deep state, to win this war. You're hearing some of the cases, and there's so much that we're having to overcome, and we're going to be talking about some more as well. But I don't want you to hear all this and be depressed. I want you to hear all this and be inspired that we have succeeded in getting to this point and winning this war, despite the roadblocks we have in our own justice system, deep state, and understand what we still have to do and the ultimate need for this judicial reform that Simcha is at the forefront of, because it's not about the corruption that or saving democracy that those that are against it try to say. It's literally about saving our lives. So now I want to move to October 7th itself. October 7th, October 8th. Dealing with the actual terrorists and with our unbelievable heroic fighters. I'm not even saying IDF fighters, because we both know, and people know I talk about this all the time, one of the miracles of October 7th was that despite the army not showing up for hours and being able to do what was necessary to protect Israelis on that horrible, horrible day, there were hundreds of regular Joe Schmo Jews from all over the country who left their homes, whether with a uniform, without a uniform, with a gun, without any orders, and just ran into the ferocious fire of Hamas to do what they could to save lives and stop the attack from being much, much worse than it could have been. And over the past few months, it's been, whether leaked or publicized, that since October 7th, the Israeli justice system has been prosecuting some of those individual heroic Jews who literally risked their lives without being called up or any orders because they went to fight Hamas. Where do things stand with those
so
cases?
We had few hearings about it in this committee, in the Constitutional Law and Justice Committee, and I think and it was published yesterday or 2 days ago, that apparently without really admitting, which is a shame, because if you don't admit you made a mistake, then you will never fix it in the long run. But as a matter of fact, the lawsuits, the indictments, whatever the position they were in the middle of this crazy event that you just described against those people were dropped, and the case is closed, or will be closed in the next few days. There is one case more complicated, that it wasn't the issue of October 7th. There was some issue of after October 7th, took some weapons, a different issue that is prosecuted, but also took into account his heroism at the day of October 7th and 8th, and he did not get even not the minimum punishment for what he really has done, apparently, in one of the cases after October 7th. But the rest are released, and the accusations were dropped. So
But it's just the fact that they
but
even spent the time
but the idea,
prosecuting heroic Jews who saved
but the
lives.
idea that this was, as I said, that got criticism from Knesset members, from the coalition, from the opposition, doesn't matter. It got a lot of criticism. I think that it's one of the main issues. It's one of the main examples of the problem with an unaccountable justice system, because everyone cares what will be told on them. How would people react to their actions? Everyone cares. If you are a politician, an elected official, you care. I care what you will do, because I don't know who did you vote for, but probably you voted for one of the parties of the coalition, maybe even for me, I don't know, I will never ask you. But I know that the public that chose me, I need to care what they think about me. If I am a judge, I don't care what the people who chose me to the position are thinking. I don't care about what the public in Israel think about what I'm doing. So in other countries, I care what the law says. Sadly, in Israel, the system is not like that. The court does whatever it wants, despite the law. But who do you care? You care the people you will meet in a cocktail party in your next trip to Europe, from other courts around the world, maybe international community, maybe academia, which we know how crazy academia can go. We all saw it in the American Congress with context. It depends on the context.
Right.
So you care what people tell you, and what people say about you, but it's not the Israeli public who care about living the next day, not being slaughtered by terrorists. They care more about which prize you will get from some academia in the world. And this shift and so the justice system, they say, okay, we did not prosecute enough war crimes, and next time we'll have her file a report in Hague. How do we prosecute a war crime when we don't have what to show them? So
we have to prove to the world that we prosecuted war crimes by Israel.
Let's investigate. And their excuse is heart-touching. They say we do it to defend the state of Israel in international court.
It's insane.
But I tell them, before you defend Israel in international courts, make sure that, God forbid, if there is another event like October 7th, people will not hesitate to save their brothers and sisters. And what you're doing is endangering lives here in Israel. I prefer the IDF heads will never be able to go to a trip in Europe, and even I will never be able to go to a trip in Europe. But we will all live here in Israel, right, and defend our lives.
Right.
So this shift in what's important and what's not important, it's something very hard to get to the heads of people who measure themselves all the time what the international community will say.
So I have two follow-up questions to that. And one is giving an even greater context. Because here, we're focusing on how the justice system, in a sense, ran to prosecute heroic Jews who risked their lives to defend fellow Jews from the atrocities of Hamas on October 7th. And yet, it's now over a year, they still haven't prosecuted the barbaric Hamas terrorists who took part in October 7th. Where's the explanation there?
Yeah, so,
and I know you're involved with in a law about
I'm
this
involved
right now.
in the law about it, and we had a lot of hearings, again, here in this committee about
But that should make any person, like, jump out of their mind.
Okay.
They're not.
So for some part of the time, I believe there is a good explanation. You keep getting information, and you keep investigating A, what happened, B, what you need to know to maybe get more information about the hostages, about the war. You still investigate. So until you finish investigating, you cannot prosecute. So, and some of it is still relevant today. Most of it not, but some of it is still relevant today. So this is not an excuse, that's a reason. That's a real solid reason why not to prosecute fast. Because you keep getting more information, by investigating, and before you finish investigating, you don't start a trial. And this is a complicated situation. You need the information. So that's a good excuse. Or not excuse, a good reason. But the main problem is, and still is, that Israeli justice system, and not just Israeli justice system, but specifically Israeli justice system in this case, don't have the right tools to even start this kind of prosecution. Because when you think in the regular system of the criminal law of Israel or any other country, you have a lot of premises that are in the base of the process that is just not relevant when you talk about those beasts. Beast is a compliment from Hamas. What do you do with representation? Who will represent them? You have lawyers to do it. Which lawyers? So I have a legislation that the state of Israel will not pay for the representation, for the legal representation of those monsters. Palestinian Authority should pay for it. Someone else. We shouldn't. You cannot. It's immoral to take money from the murderer, from the people who were murdered and raped, and all crazy things that we saw there. Takes their money and
take our taxpayer money to pay for their defense.
Pay for their defense. It doesn't make any sense. So that's one issue. Who will represent them? Will it be a regular system, in the regular court system in Israel, in the regular prosecution system, with the regular rules of procedures? It can take forever. We see how long a simple case goes in Israel. There are many reasons to it. Can we have it on hundreds, tens, thousands of terrorists? What would it do to the justice system in Israel? It will be blocked for years, just with this. What do we do? You need a special system, not system. Which law? On what you will prosecute them? On murder, on terror, on war crimes, on genocide? So all those issues that, with a very unique situation, you need to change the mindset. And the system in Israel is very, very strong in their view of terror as a criminal act and not as an act of war. And it's not only Israeli system, I have to say, but in Israel,
we should be one of the first to realize it's not that and changed that years ago, but our justice system continues that way.
So I said today in the committee, I said maybe the first step we should do in Israel on this issue and other issues, there is an act that was passed in 2016, an act of fighting terror. We should abolish it. Because when we look at it on terror, we're confusing ourselves and we are confusing the world.
Meaning that act of fighting terror tags it as a criminal act.
It tags it as a criminal act. It limits the punishments on special acts. And I said, look at it on genocide and don't look at it as terror. Because terror, and that's a very simple point that sometimes people don't understand. You can act toward legitimate goal in a legitimate way, and you can act toward a legitimate goal in a terror way. Israel can have a war with Iran as a war of army versus army. Theoretically, we could send terror groups to fight Iran. The goal is legitimate, to stop Iran from getting the bomb. It's a legitimate goal, but we can act in an illegitimate way just by, for example, bombing civilians just to deter Iran. So we don't do it because we don't act in a way of terror. Iran does it because it's a state of terror. But our goal can be legitimate and can be reached in illegitimate way. That's terror. When you talk about genocide, there is no legitimate way to achieve the destruction of the Jewish people. It's not that you can do it in a legitimate way, to kill all the Jews in a legitimate way, and in a non-legitimate way. And that's when we talk about it as a terror, the world says, okay, So you basically agree that the war of the Palestinians is for freedom and self-determination, but you are complaining that you are bombing civilian targets and not army bases. That's not the case. The goals of the Palestinians is to kill all the Jews. That's why they chant from the river to the sea, Palestine would be free, and they mean it in the German way, Jeden frei, free of Jews, let's kill all the Jews. That's what they say, that's what they chant. There is no legitimate and illegitimate way to achieve this goal.
Right.
And so that's why we shouldn't look at it as terror. We should look at it as a genocide against the Jewish people. And then there is and then it changes the entire perspective. And then you prosecute it in a different way. You look at it, it's not the regular criminal system. You don't try to rehabilitate someone who is terror, because it's not terror. It is a genocidal guy. You need to get the world to be a better place without his presence. It's like one of, I don't remember who made this quote, maybe you would remember. Someone asked, can you forgive your enemies? I think it was about the Nazis or something. Can you think you can find forgiveness to one of your enemies? He says, forgiveness is something for God. My job is to get them to God as soon as possible.
Right.
So it's, right. You don't try to solve this issue in here on the ground. It's not for you. You need to make sure this threat of the existence of the Jewish people in the land of Israel is being eliminated.
So that sounds like a really, really game-changing bill. Where does it stand?
So we're trying to
It's just started the process, end of the process?
It's the start of the process. Because, as you understand...
So they're going to try to stop it to make it go for years?
Of course. To get this big
it's a huge change.
Aircraft carrier, change the course of thinking about this issue, to shift. It will take time. It's definitely worth it. And I think we will get the support. Coalition, opposition, the public, because the people in Israel understand it.
What's the
right,
name of the bill?
left. No, it's how to judge the October 7th.
No, everyone pay attention to this
so
bill.
It will
this is a critical bill to change directions
I hope we will get baby steps to get them to start prosecuting them on genocide and not on other crimes. Together with other crimes, but basically genocide.
Wow, that's huge. All right, well, good luck with that, Simcha. That's going to be a huge game changer. That, in a sense, forces the justice system to deal with our
reality
differently,
with reality.
Right, it's the reality, and to hopefully start saving our lives and not protecting the rights of the terrorists under civil law. So now I want to come to the second follow-up question to what you said in terms of our jurists here in Israel who are not thinking about the Israeli public, or they're thinking more about how they're viewed on the international stage and fellow jurists around the world, etc. And I'm going to bring one very, very painful example, but it's only one of many. There were Israeli soldiers who were in a jail guarding over some of the worst Hamas terrorists from October 7th. And if I'm not mistaken, based on information that the justice system itself reached out to the terrorists asking how his time in jail was, how his treatment in jail was, then they went after investigating some of those jailers on accusations of rape and molestation. And that was headline news around the world, where our own justice system created a blood libel against our own based on their intent of trying to protect Israel from war crimes. And it really blew a fuse here in Israel, where Israelis were going crazy. How are you investigating our holy soldiers who have the toughest job, and especially when it's based on proof or testimony of that same horrendous terrorist. So this is just one of, again, many of the cases where we're showing how the judicial system is zealous and again, the jurists and we want to show Israel is as clean as snow, and in their process of trying to show Israel is as clean as snow, right now Israel's name is black as darkness because those blood libels still exist around the world. And that, you're on Twitter, I'm on Twitter, Instagram, you have people all over the world today blaming us and our holy IDF soldiers who are fighting the most evil in the world as the front line of the whole freedom-loving world as rapists and molesters, etc., because of the integrity of the justice system itself.
Yeah.
And again, it was thrown out.
So it's really you would say Hasid Shateh if it was on other occasions, like people who are trying to be so holy that they forget basic human dignity and basic moral, because they're trying. I really can't understand it, I have to say. I try and I don't understand this way of thinking, and it's like that. They're trying to win a war that they will never win.
What are you referring to?
They're trying to get. Doesn't matter what you will do with the UN, with the ICC.
In terms of them trying to prosecute Israelis in order to show the international world that, oh, Israel, we're clean. We
trying
go
to
after
convince them in something that they will never be confused.
But they're not going to like us anyway.
Yeah, and they will issue enough blood libels by themselves. Don't help them, and they will never be persuaded that Israel is pure, because they were never persuaded to begin with that Israel is not pure. It's purely politics and interests. So I really don't understand. I think we have too many lawyers in Israel, and I'm a lawyer. So too many lawyers. When you are used to think on everything as a legal issue, not everything is legal. Not everything is you can adjudicate. Not everything is justiciable. There are also other professions. There are also common sense. You cannot legislate common sense. Just enough. And you're trying to explain to them you are doing damage, and really like zealots, like
right
of this a religion of I don't
right.
Listen. It's not easy to find me without words. I cannot understand this craziness.
Right.
And the only way to prevent this is accountability, because once you are accountable to the public or to the elected officials, then you understand that you cannot get away with it. So you have to give consideration to what the people need and what the people want. That we have a system who is unaccountable.
Maybe you should change the next time you bring up push forward. I'm saying this seriously. Push forward the judicial reform. Change the terminology. Use the brilliance of the left. Judicial accountability. Also, I'm just throwing it out there. I don't know if it was used or thought about it.
It's the main problem. The main problem. We of course spoke about it a lot. Yeah. The main problem is, sadly, $500 million was invested in campaign to claim just the otherwise. That's why people call it judicial. The judicial overall or judicial destructing democracy. Right. If I would have the amount of
money
and the will of the mainstream media to support those blood libels, we will all be in a different place.
Right.
But again, in the long run, you cannot beat common sense. You cannot beat the will of the people. You cannot beat real democracy, not democracy, fake democracies that you shout and you actually mean you want to take away the power from the people. And that's why I'm optimistic.
Right.
I'm optimistic, of course, on the war, as you said, and I'm optimistic on that Israel will change its justice system, and finally we will have a real justice system that works according to just what real just and what real moral means, and not this craziness.
Right, ideology. So this is a great segue to go more into the positive. We'll end on the positive. I just want to finish a follow-up question in terms of the zealotry you're referring to, in terms of the justice system, and specifically the case of these soldiers from that State Taiman prison. Because, and what's interesting, because you just touched upon this as well, the war woke up the people to the problems of the justice system. Like, we're talking about some of the issues, and thanks to alternative media outlets out there that didn't exist a few years ago, more Israelis are hearing about the flaws within the justice system in terms of stopping us from fighting this war and going after our own soldiers instead of going after terrorists with the same zealotry, etc. So, and that's a positive direction we're going, and specifically dealing with this that prison case, the zealotry of the justice system. They literally fabricated a video and leaked it to the press that, in a sense, gave the picture to the public, oh, the soldiers really were bad. But then it was proven that the video was fabricated, and yet there's still no prosecution or investigation of those within the justice system who were behind the fabrication and the leaking of that video to the press.
And Chief Legal Advisor, the Attorney General of Israel, were asked to investigate it, and she said, let the army prosecution investigate their own. And the court says it doesn't make any sense. So even the justice system within itself understands that on some issues they went too far.
Right.
So yes, it's and the fact that the idea of conflict of interest, the idea of accountability, the idea of giving answers to the public, they try to put it on elected officials and only on elected officials, and they can run and get away with anything they have. And we will not accept it. We are doing here in the Knesset on incitement to terror, on those issues you mentioned. All of them were exposed here in the Knesset. And I think this Knesset, and especially my committee, this committee, have done more hearing of parliamentarian supervision than any other period of time compared in history, not only during the war, even before.
Right.
So there is a change. I believe today more people accept that they cannot look at the court as like some saints in black robes that you cannot criticize. And this change will happen. It's happening. It's not only in the future, it's happening in the present. And I hope the divisive powers that acted in Israel, they will try to operate the same way.
Right.
I know.
They don't want to lose their power.
But they have less audience today.
Right.
Less people are buying into those lies.
Right.
And that's a source of optimism.
Right. And now to end on the optimism with the war effort in the judicial system, and with this we'll end the interview. And thank you so much for your time. And I hope everyone really appreciates all of the in-depth information and answers they're getting from you, directly from someone who's involved in here in the Knesset and in Israel's justice system, and trying to reform it so that it has the judicial, what's the word we came up? The judicial accountability that is we so need in order to protect our lives. The optimism of the war effort, I'm going to bring you back to the Second Lebanon War. I was called up, my unit, Second Lebanon War, and I remember it was forbidden for us. There's only one of the rules of engagement that I believed, and I was calling out and speaking to my commanders at the time, saying, "You're not helping us win. You're making us lose." We were forbidden to shoot at terrorists who were shooting from mosques. Forbidden. This is back in 2006, Second Lebanon War. Just one of the many rules of engagement that we had our hands tied behind our backs from being able to fight Hezbollah properly. Today, thankfully, we're seeing videos of mosques that are used as terror centers being blown up in Gaza, in Lebanon. huge difference, as we say in Hebrew, shamayim va'aretz. Something changed. We're finally fighting our enemies like we're supposed to in order to give them the reason not to fight against us again. And I'll give you the second example. I think this was back from 2014, and it's from Tzuk and that Gaza operation. And I think it was Benny Gantz who was the chief of staff of the IDF at the time. And afterwards, he spoke publicly saying how he was proud, how he risked the lives of the Golani soldiers not to shoot at the terrorists who were hiding in a hospital. And today, in this war, we're going after them, even in the hospitals, and destroying those hospitals. And we were able to show the whole world that they weren't just hiding in the hospitals. They had their terror centers, their headquarters in the hospitals, and they were using the hospitals as a way to protect themselves. So the optimism here is that we're finally seeing the army, I'm sure not 100%, finally fighting and being released from all those judicial restraints that were holding us back for decades to protect ourselves.
So there is those examples that you said are a change, and I believe this change, I think even judicial reform helped create this change, because suddenly it put a spotlight on the real decision makers on some issues. Actually, you mentioned Tzuk. Before I was in the Knesset, you interviewed me, as you remember, and I founded an organization named the Israeli Movement for Governability and Democracy, short name Meshilut, which is governability in Hebrew. And after during Tzuk, we published a hotline. If your life has been endangered by judicial action or by a legal advisor order, call this number and report. And we got few reports in Tzuk, but what I learned that was even more important than the calls that we got, and we tried to connect it to the right people, as an NGO, as an organization working
outside
of
people
government.
Who served as soldiers were calling up about legal issues that they were having.
They said my life was endangered by
these rules of engagement.
And we got some information from this, but that was like the small part. I think the most important part and we thought, okay, I don't remember the amount, but it wasn't big numbers that we got from, because we were a small organization, not a lot of budget, and not a lot of manpower to deal with also with the calls that we got at the time. But I came to some event of a convention of lawyers and legal experts a year after the war, and I saw the head of the chief lawyer for the army, the chief legal advisor for the army. He gave a speech, and he said, they even put a hotline to report on us. They saw it.
Wow.
And I know that it made a change. I know even from checking afterwards.
Wow.
So the fact that just putting the spotlight where power lies, that's the power of the light is strong. People see it, people criticize it. And as I said, everyone cares what people say about them. Politicians, that's the restriction we have on our politicians. Politician cannot go wrong and do whatever he wants, because his voters will not vote for him again. And if he does that, like some politicians did in the right camp a few years ago, and they went to the other side, they're not in politics today.
Right, they pay a price.
Naftali Bennett, Ayelet Shaked, they're not in politics today in Israel. They failed elections because they ran away from their voters and what they promised. But people who don't give any accountability, don't owe any allegiance to the people of Israel, they can really go to very dangerous places. So once you put a spotlight, and people look at them, and people criticize them, the change comes.
final words of hope, inspiration to the Jewish people and Israel supporters
We
around the
spoke
world?
all the time about hope and inspiration. We gave a lot of examples. You gave, I gave. The best inspiration and hope that we have is that it doesn't matter. Ashur lo yoshienu al sus lo nirkav. We have Hashem with us. We of course would like anyone in the world to help us, but we don't count on them. We count on Hashem and on His choice, the people of Israel, and the amazing soldiers and the entire public of Israel that knows what He's fighting for and fights.
Right. So now, everyone, you get to understand how, and I try to explain this, we're not just fighting a front on the international battle, diplomacy, United Nations, the Biden administration, not just fighting with our soldiers on the ground. We have this internal battle against this judicial deep state holding us back. And you're getting a little bit more insight to understanding the amount of work, like the work of ants, one step at a time, one brick at a time, that is needed to be done in order to really overcome that internal battle. But again, I'm following up with what Simcha said as well. Our hope and our inspiration is our people, is our soldiers, is our belief in God, is our unity of purpose, unity of identity, and we're going to win. We're winning, and we're going to win. And we're going to be bringing the change thanks to wonderful, strong, hardworking politicians like Simcha working in these halls to make that difference. Thank you so much, Simcha.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Always a pleasure. Always a pleasure speaking to Simcha Rothman. If you are not yet a subscriber to Pulse of Israel, go to pulseofisrael.com and click to subscribe, where you get the belief-based, inspiring, politically incorrect truth about Israel, the Jewish people, and the freedom-loving world that you really don't get in other media outlets. And again, we're a donor-based operation. If this is important to you, and getting information, the behind the scenes, behind the headlines, with important people like Simcha Rothman, every once in a while, click on the donate button on pulseofisrael.com. Shalom, everyone. Thanks for watching.
Pulse of Israel, frontline videos from the Holy Land. Support our work by donating today.